So I recently did a fast. What I learned? Quite interesting. So if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you either have done a fast before, you want to do a fast, you've thought about doing a fast, or somehow you even heard of a fast. You at least know what it is. And if you've ever had a question about fasting or the experience, I'm going to share my experience with you and everything that I learned through the process. So a little while ago, I was going through a period in my life where I needed God to speak to me. I was making a lot of decisions, and honestly, I did not know what to do. And at this point, I wasn't completely distant from God. I know I was doing my devotion, I was reading my Bible, I was praying every day, but I needed something closer to make this decision and to make these multiple decisions that really had a heavy impact on my life. I needed God to speak to me. I knew I probably wasn't in a spiritual position where I would hear God the way I wanted to, or how I needed to, or how I was supposed to. So the question I asked myself was, how do I get closer to God? How do I truly get in his presence and get his attention? I recalled reading in my Bible multiple characters who fasted and prayed during their lifetimes. Moses fasted on Mount Sinai, Daniel fasted in Babylon, Elijah fasted, Jesus fasted in the wilderness. Multiple people fasted. And I look up to these guys. Like these are the Bible goats, you know what I'm saying? And I thought, hey, if you want to be like the best, you got to train like the best. So I made up in my mind that I was going to do a fast so I could draw deeper and stronger in my connection with God. Well, the problem was I didn't know how to do a fast. I had done a Daniel fast before with my church, but even then it was more so like the whole church was doing it, so I kind of just did it as well. And it was more so like a diet than an actual spiritual experience. I had to do this right. If I'm going to be sacrificing food in my life, I'm going to do it right. So I began to dig into the Bible deeper to really understand these characters, how they fasted, what they did, how they did it. But honestly, I still wasn't that clear on how to go about this. Somehow, I honestly don't remember how I came across this book, but I came across this book called God's Chosen Fast by Arthur Wallace. Yo, this book changed everything. If you are thinking about doing a fast, want to do a fast with purpose and intentionality, you need to read this book. It breaks down fasting to its most granular form. It takes you through the what, the why, the how, and not only gives you that, but it also gives you a diary of someone doing a fast so that you can see what a regular person's experience is while fasting. Up until this point, it was kind of left up to my imagination on how the experience would actually be. I mean, I could compare myself to Jesus, but I don't really want to compare myself to Jesus, even though, he was technically human. Anyway, so I'm going to break down the basic components of fasting that I learned when I first started this. First, what is fasting? Fasting is actually just abstaining from food, not eating food. There have been other forms added to this word where you are abstaining from something that might be blocking or hindering your connection from God, but the most literal meaning of the word is just not to eat food. This is why you could have a fast that's completely not spiritual. It could just be for dietary purposes, or you fast before you get your blood drawn or something like that. The first thing that you have to understand before you start fasting is why you are fasting in the first place. The book quickly discourages fasting for selfish purposes or out of any place of self-centeredness. I immediately felt called out. I was like, am I selfish in my intentions? Am I self-centered in my intentions? Actually, low-key, yeah, I think I was being kind of selfish in my intentions, to be honest. And that I'm glad I read this book because it called me out. I wanted an answer from God to my prayers. But fasting isn't about the individual. It's about worship. Fasting is like prayer. It has to be God ordained and God initiated in order for it to be effective. God is more concerned about why you are doing it rather than what you're doing. I truly did believe that God and the Holy Spirit was calling me to do this fast, but I had to reform my mindset. I had to give up what I wanted out of the fast and let God show me what I needed to get through this fast. Okay, secondly, I was shown that there were multiple types of fasts. I didn't really know all this. I didn't know they had names, at least. The first type of fast is a normal fast, and that basically means that you eat no food, solid or liquid, but you can drink water. Second type of fast is the absolute fast. This kind of goes with the name. It's you absolutely nothing goes inside. Like you can't drink water and you do not eat any food, solid or liquid. This type of fast usually doesn't go longer than 3 days because the ramifications could be pretty bad. I mean, you can't go as long without water as you can without food, and dehydration is pretty serious. There are examples of people doing this in the Bible, but those were definitely supernatural occurrences in the presence of God. So I would not recommend doing the absolute fast unless you feel moved by the Holy Spirit that you are called to do that. And make sure, pray like 3 times about that. The third type of fast is a partial fast, and this is what I referred to earlier. It's also called a Daniel fast. It's referred to this way because of in Daniel 1, Daniel and his Hebrew friends denied the king's food when they were taken captive in Babylon, and they decided to only eat vegetables and water for that time, and that time was 10 days. I think it was 10 days. Well, I know lots of people do it for 10 days. So the name is explanatory again. It's a partial fast, which means you don't eat everything that you want to eat, but you can eat something. It's partial, more like a dietary restriction than elimination, but it can be quite effective. Which fast you choose to do completely depends on where the Holy Spirit is guiding you and what you need personally. But what I recommend for you to do right now is hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. No, really though, if you get the like button, if you got anything beneficial from this video, I would appreciate it. So I chose to do the normal fast, which means I could drink water, but I ate absolutely no food. I chose to do this for 48 hours. So I went from Thursday night to the end of the Sabbath, which is Saturday night. I chose to do a normal fast because I have already done a partial fast in the past, and I knew it wouldn't change my lifestyle too much to do the partial fast, and I needed to seek God in a way I have never saw him before. So I decided to go with something a little bit more, I guess, extreme. I knew that if I did the partial fast, that my efforts would probably in fact be partial, and I didn't need partial at this time. I chose to do 2 days of fasting because I wanted to push myself beyond my normal limits, and I knew that by the second day, everything will pretty much be dependent on God sustaining me because that's the longest I've never eaten before in my life. A more common normal fast is 3 days, but also I wanted to be careful in how I approached this and not just go crazy because you don't know the physical ramifications it might have on your body by abruptly stopping food for this period of time. I prayed about it and 2 days felt right in my spirit. Alright, so the first day of fasting was honestly the worst out of the 2. Yo, I was so hungry. Those hunger pains came the first morning, yo. Like I didn't even get to lunch. By the time I'm a breakfast guy. I always eat breakfast. By the time I had breakfast, I was like, yo. You don't realize like how much your body operates in a cycle, a rhythm, a routine until you abruptly break that routine. And for some reason, like I don't know why I thought this, but like I thought that maybe during a fast, like some time of spiritual revelation, like the Lord will sustain you. Like you eating the bread of life, like, you know, you won't be hungry because you got Jesus. Nah, fam, that ain't true, man. I mean, it might be true, but it wasn't true in my experience. So if you expect to like be on some high elevated level of no hunger, don't set that bar. It was even worse because the enemy tried to get me, man. My family ordered pizza that night. I came home and there was pizza on the table, smelling all delicious and stuff. So I read and wrote down some scriptures that night to sustain me throughout this process because I realized that this was going to be a little bit harder than I thought. Here's the other thing I realized while fasting. You don't realize how much time you spend eating every day until you're not eating. We spend a solid couple hours every day just eating. And when that's gone, you have so much more time in your day. This is actually great because you could fill that time that you would normally be eating with spending time and growing closer to God. I added 2 to 3 hours of studying and praying and just being still in the presence of God to my day just by not eating. As we went into day 2 of the fast, my hunger pains weren't as bad, but I did realize that I was starting to lose some of my energy. This actually was not a completely bad thing. It was during the weekend, it was the Sabbath, and that is normally a time of rest for me anyway. But having such a low energy level, it kind of just forced me to be still in God's presence. During this time, I read Isaiah chapter 58, which is a chapter in the Bible that's pretty much just dedicated to fasting. One thing that I never realized or knew about fasting was how much emphasis God puts on serving while fasting. The whole chapter is basically saying fasting is all about denying yourself and serving others. I'll put the link to that chapter in the description below. This is a far cry from what most people think fasting is, including myself. I didn't know either. We get so focused on what we want to get out of fasting that we forget that fasting isn't about us. It's about worship. And Jesus's go-to worship style was service. I've been serving in my community since quarantine started pretty much weekly up to this point. And it made complete sense. When you go out and serve others, you are filled with something that food can't really do for you. You get filled up. I don't know what it is, but you get filled up with something. By the time my fast was finished, I felt closer to God than I had in a very long time. It felt great. I was more keen to God's voice, and because of that, I was able to hear him actually answer my prayers. There is one thing though that I probably did wrong when the fast was done. I was hungry, yo. So I went straight back to eating, and I ate whatever was in the house. And at that moment, what was in the house was junk food. My body paid for that for pretty much the next week. It just was my digestive system was just messed up, man. I should have eased my body back into eating with healthier foods, like vegetables and fruits, instead of pizza and chips. Overall, I learned a lot from my first total fasting experience. And I hope you gather something from my experience that you can apply to yours, or something that you want to do in your future that involves fasting. I still implore you to go down in the description. I have it right there linked up, the book God's Chosen Fast by Arthur Wallace. You definitely want to read that if you're thinking about doing a fast. If you have fasted before or you're thinking about it, let me know down in the comments. All right, y'all, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any content that I release every Wednesday that helps you grow your future and your faith. And hit that notification bell to make sure that you don't miss it. All right, y'all. Peace.